All right, this video is about vision. So far you have already looked at the parts of the eye when it comes to the outside part of the eye and the kind of getting to the inside of the part of the eye. But the big part that I want to focus in on is the retina. So far you should have already looked at with your eye model that your cornea protects the outside part of your eye. The colored part of your eye is your iris. The black part of your eye is your pupil. So the iris is basically controlling and dilating or expanding or contracting the size of your pupil. So obviously making it bigger to let more light in when it's dark out, or making it smaller when it's very bright. Then the light passes through the lens back here, which focuses the light and the information coming into your eye and sends it back to the retina. So that's basically where I want to pick up, because there's some little parts of the retina in there that I want to make sure that we understand. So within the retina, light goes through the retina to basically all the way to the back part of the retina. So you'll see that the light comes in, and this is the bigger picture here. The light comes in and we're going to the retina, that's this thin layer on the back. Well, if we focus in on this thin layer, what happens is the light goes all the way to the back of the retina to where we see these rods and cones. So the rods are going to be these blue long squiggle things, and the cones are these kind of yellow-orange kind of squiggle things. And so the rods and the cones are different as far as what their functions are. So the rods detect black and white, gray. These are going to be important for peripheral vision, as well as vision at twilight or any time during the dark. So for example, you notice that we have more rods than cones, so this is going to make it a little bit easier to be able to see at the in the dark, but we don't see color. Okay, so for example, recently I went on a overnight trip with my Girl Scout troop, and during the overnight it was going to be interesting because we went on a night hike with one of the naturalists in the park, and during the night hike they actually talked about nighttime animals and how they have really good hearing and really good sense of touch, but also obviously very good vision. Now again, even night animals do not see in color. So the interesting part is that there was an activity where they had the girls go and each take a crayon, and then they had them look at the crayon, and obviously we're out in the middle of nowhere in the dark, okay, and we've been in the dark for a while, so our eyes have adjusted somewhat, so our pupils are very dilated, but they're supposed to look at the crayon and try and figure out what color it was, and then they came around with a sheet of paper, and they had each girl go and write down what color they think their crayon is. And then when we got back to the nature center, they showed us the paper, and so then the girls could see whether they were right in their guess. Now the interesting thing is that obviously I had some girls that were so excited because they got it right. Some of them were kind of disappointed because they got it wrong. But even the girls that got it wrong, for example, I had one that she said that she thought it was a yellow crayon, but it was actually orange. Well, it's still a very similar color, is what I kind of tried to console her with, is that I was like, keep in mind that because of, and I didn't tell her rods and cones, but because of our rods, we can't see the colors specifically, but we can definitely tell light from dark. So as a result, she could definitely see that this is a light color versus a dark color. So she wasn't too far off. Cones, on the other hand, are going to detect those fine details, and they're going to highlight the colors for us. They also function very well during daylight as well as other well-lit conditions, and so you'll notice that we don't have as many cones. Now, once the rods and cones picks up the light and the dark and the details and everything else, then they pass on that information to the bipolar cells. And so the bipolar cells are these kind of really dark purple ones in the middle here. Okay, the bipolar cells are going to be activated by the rods and cones, And then the bipolar cells will activate these light purple things that are called the ganglion cells. And the ganglion cells, you can kind of see that there is these lines kind of coming off the ganglion cells. These are all where the ganglion cells basically come together and form the optic nerve. And so they're all coming together and they form this optic nerve. And if you remember from your eye model, the optic nerve basically is going to be our connection to our brain. So the interesting thing, though, is that where the optic nerve leaves the eye, right here, okay, there are absolutely no receptors. No receptors at all. No rods, no cones, no bipolar cells, no ganglion cells at all. So this is actually what we call our blind spot. What this means, though, is that, okay, so if information has come, we're getting light in here, we get some sort of picture coming in here, and it's being basically directed back to our retina back here, okay? But we don't have any receptor cells here, okay? What that means is that whatever light is trying to be reflected back here is not being picked up. So technically, we should have some sort of giant black spot, right, in our field of vision. But we don't. Why? Why is it that, you know, we do have a blind spot where we have this space in our eye and where there's nothing to pick up whatever we're seeing right there? How come we don't have this giant, you know, black spot that's following us around in our visual field? Well, part of it has to do with the fact that since we're constantly looking around, we're moving our eyes, and we have two eyes, that helps, right? But the other part of the thing is that our brain also fills in the gaps. So our brain is constantly filling in those gaps for us. So another reason why our brain's kind of cool. So that's basically how this is going to work. Now, once we get to the brain, then we can talk about how we process information. So we have Hubble and Weissel that discovered that we have what we call feature detectors. And feature detectors are basically parts of the brain that are going to pick up specific parts of a stimuli. And so it will pick up the shape, the general shape, any movements or angles. So for example, you may be taking notes right now, and so you will pick up the shape of your notebook is a rectangle, and the angle that you're holding your pencil at, and the movement of your pencil, right? But parallel processing is the idea that we take all of that information in at one time. So it's not like first we take in the shape and then we process the angle and then we process any movement. No. It's all taken in at once. Okay, so I did find this cute little, very elementary poster here on feature detectors that some AP Psych student did. But it's showing you feature detectors. It says specialized neurons that detect or activate shapes, angles, and movements. And so it's SAM, shapes, angles, and movements. Okay, so we're processing all of that at once. So when we're processing all this information, what about things like color? So have you seen this dress? This dress was trending a few years ago in the cyberspace, and people were arguing over what color is this dress. Well, here is a scientific explanation for it.
Alright, so the world has seemingly become utterly divided on this dress. What colors do you see? On the one hand, we have team black and blue. On the other, team white and gold. We asked on Twitter and got hundreds of responses for both white and gold and black and blue. For what it's worth, we both saw black and blue and thought this was a massive prank at first. So how can it be possible for people to see it so differently? It's a phenomenon known as color constancy. Take this cube, for example. The middle square on the top appears to be a shade of brown, while the one on the side looks much more orange. But in actuality, they're both the exact same color. We promise we haven't cheated here or done any trick photography. Instead, our brain looks at the context, sees a shadow, and instantly thinks, oh, shadows make objects appear darker. And so the brain compensates and interprets the square as lighter than it appears, until the shadow is taken away. Back to the dress, and we have a similar situation, except here the context is very arbitrary. We're so close up to the dress that we don't really know its surroundings, and the brain has to make assumptions. People who picture the dress as white have brains which may be interpreting the dress in a blue lit room, for example, as in it's near a window with a bright blue sky. It makes perfect sense then that the white dress would be tinted blue and that the gold color wouldn't really change. On the other hand, the brains of people who see it as black and blue may be interpreting the dress in an artificially lit setting like somewhere with yellow lights. As a result, the brain sees the gold as just a reflection off of the black and believes that the blue has been unaffected. Chances are that this image just happens to be perfectly ambiguous to our brain, meaning it all comes down to individual perception and even how and where you view the image. From a factual standpoint, the dress is blue. In fact, here are some other pictures of it. But this is a beautiful example of how our brains have evolved to interpret the world around us without us even realizing. Want more answers to the world's craziest phenomena? Get the ASAP Science book to feed your curiosity at ASAP.
All right, so that's basically an explanation of color constancy. We're going to get more into color constancy in a little bit later, as well as shape constancy and those kinds of things. But it does explain that, yes, it is a blue and black dress. I don't know what you saw, but it does make a difference, and it shows you that a lot of your interpretation has to do with how your brain actually perceives it. All right, that's it for now. Let me know if you have any questions.